Oh, howdy all, grab yourself a beer, it's time for some Path of Exile discussion. Today, I wanted to continue a series where I've been looking at various unique items within Path of Exile that are oriented at endgame players, looking at why they're good and how you can go about building around them. Today, I wanted to cover one of my personal favourite items, and that is the Eternity Shroud. Now, this is a unique item that is only available as a pretty rare drop from the Uber Elder encounter. If you're playing in solo self-found, you know how to target farm it. You've got to kill Uber Elder, but therein lies the difficulty. One, you need to access the Uber Elder encounter, and two, you actually need to successfully beat it. And it's not just a case of beating it once either. The Eternity Shroud does not have a very high drop rate. I'm not sure whether it's more at the 5% end of the spectrum or more at the 15% end, but it's not something that's either extraordinarily rare nor very common. So you could be at it for a long time if you're trying this in solo self-found. That said, in a trade league, it does tend to be one of those items that's pretty available by about the third week of the league. So weeks 1 and 2, the very few Eternity Shrouds that are on the market will be expensive. But after that, people that are target farming their really powerful Watcher's Eyes will end up generating a lot of the other unique items from the Uber Elder encounter, sort of almost as a waste product, and as a result, you can pick up an Eternity Shroud fairly cheap. And that's what I did on this character. When I respec'd into Eternity Shroud on them, I spent 5 or 6 Exalted Orbs in trade and picked up one that was already 6-linked. So, what does the Eternity Shroud do? Well, firstly, it has a trigger level 20 Glimpse of Eternity when hit. This is not particularly useful. It's not completely useless either, but the Glimpse of Eternity skill, and I think from memory it actually comes up with a, not with an icon here, but with an icon on your character sheet as a skill that you can't cast yourself. What it does is it slows the action speed of enemies that are within a small area centered upon where you were when you were hit. It's not bad, but it's not anything to write home about. Think of it as a very small little bonus. It has a modest amount of defensive stats, energy shield, evasion, and life and chaos resistance. All of these are bonuses, but none of them are the reason that you're wearing them, the item. The reason you wear the Eternity Shroud is the last 2 lines. So firstly, you have gain 3 to 5% of elemental damage as extra chaos damage per Shaper item equipped. Now, this needs to be Divine Orbed to 5. It needs to be perfect. The other rolls on the Eternity Shroud don't matter, but this roll, if it's not 5%, you don't want to use the item. It's that important to you. This is a monumental source of additional damage. We'll talk about how you scale it later, but essentially, if you're dealing 100 points of lightning damage with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 pieces of Shaper equipment, then that's going to add 50 points of chaos damage as well. Then this will stack with things like Azari's Promise, which we covered earlier. So that on its own is pretty significant, but the sort of build that's going to be running Eternity Shroud is going to be able to scale the chaos damage even further, and they're also going to benefit a lot from the last line. So the last line reads, hits ignore enemy chaos resistance if all equipped items are Shaper items. Now, a very important caveat. The first thing that needs to be said is that you cannot use a Thief's Trinket and benefit from this last line. I don't think this should be the case, but this is the case. It's probably a bit of a bug, but it's one of those bugs that's going to be a low priority to fix. Because ultimately, the percentage of people using the Eternity Shroud, it's only power gamers that are going to have access to it, and amongst the power gamers, it's only a small number that will use this item because it is pretty niche. So that's the first thing that needs to be said. It does not work in conjunction with a Thief's Trinket, and as a result, you will need to pick between them. My default is that I actually leave the Thief's Trinket on and just accept that I don't get the benefit from that last line. That's because otherwise you forget to equip it when you go into Heist. But next league, I don't think that's going to matter as much. Once 3.13 hits, the Heist content won't be as central a part of the play experience. So for that reason, your Thief's Trinket won't be as important. Now, how do you get yourself Shaper items, you might be asking? So this item is encouraging you to use a Shaper item in every slot. So I have started out by picking up in trade a Hubris Circlet that already had the enchant that I wanted on it. Penance Brand deals 40% increased damage and was already a Shaper item. If you can't find that, so let's say that you're planning to play a build around Penance Brand in the next league, and you decide that you want to use the Eternity Shroud, but you can't find any helmets that are the right type for your build and that are already Shaper influenced with that enchant, what you can do is pick up any helmet that has no influences on it, apply any of the Elder Slayer's Exalted Orbs, so a Redeemer's Exalt, Crusader Exalt, or whatever, and then add on Shaper influence by using an Awakener's Orb. If you do this and you use your Awakener's Orb correctly, then the Hubris Circlet, or let's say that you picked up a Hubris Circlet that was uninfluenced to start with, you'll end up with something like a Crusader and Shaper influenced Hubris Circlet that has the desired enchant on it. So that's how you can fix up the helmet slot and still manage to get yourself an enchant. There's a number of unique items that you can't use, but for everything else there's chance orbs. This here Call of the Brotherhood you will see is Shaper and Hunter influenced. The Hunter influence is just purely me being silly and is totally unnecessary. The Shaper influence, however, is very important for the Eternity Shroud. And the way that this Call of the Brotherhood was created was by looking around in trade for someone that was selling a Shaper-influenced two-stone ring that is Cold and Lightning. And then once I had that, it was just a case of applying Chance Orbs until it became Call of the Brotherhood. For Call of the Brotherhood specifically, the easiest way to do this is in conjunction with the Trash to Treasure prophecy, which gets very expensive over the period of a league. But early in a league, you may just choose to use a normal Call of the Brotherhood instead, and forgo some of the bonuses, especially given that these are so expensive to pick up. Like the Trash to Treasure prophecy, by the end of a league can be 20 exalts, and early in the league, I paid 5 for each of mine. Then you'll also want to fill out all of your other equipment slots in the same way. A number of unique items, and I want to call to mind Xerxes' Heart at this point, because I do use Xerxes' Heart a lot on this build. A lot of unique items do not exist as a Shaper version at all. Xerxes' Heart's an example of that. Unique items that drop from bosses cannot be made Shaper influenced by any means. Unique items that are upgrades usually can't be. And there's a few other things. It's all over the place. Feel free to ask. I sort of know the criteria generally, but I don't. It's hard to really explain it. Essentially, though, if something comes from League content, it is probably available to be used as a Shaper influenced item, as long as that League is available to choose on Zana's map device. Then after that, you can just put yourself with Shaper equipment in every other slot. Now, in terms of some of the things that you would use alongside Eternity Shroud, the 3.13 overhaul of the Elementalist Ascendancy has quite a lot of promise here. Additionally, there is a powerful Trickster node, at least during 3.12, which grants a lot of additional extra Chaos damage from non-Chaos damage. But the single most important thing with Eternity Shroud is that if your damage is initially dealt as lightning damage, it can then be converted to cold via the use of Call of the Brotherhood. If your damage is initially dealt as cold, or has been converted into cold, it can then be transformed into fire damage through the use of cold to fire support. Each time that you do this, the Eternity Shroud will, what players tend to call double dip. What that means is that the Eternity Shroud bonus of 5% of elemental damage as extra chaos damage per Shaper item equipped, so 50% extra damage as chaos. That will apply both to the amount of lightning damage, even though you're not actually inflicting that lightning damage, then it will apply to the cold damage, even though you're only applying part of that, then it will apply to the fire damage as well. This provides tremendous scaling. And whilst I can't really demonstrate exactly how much on this character because of the fact that I don't have an alternate 6-link to use in place of the Eternity Shroud, it is certainly something like 80% of the damage that my build does comes from the Eternity Shroud. Skills that work particularly well with this are skills that deal physical and all lightning damage, and if they deal physical damage, you need to fully convert it to lightning to get maximum benefit out of the Eternity Shroud. Then you want to use it in conjunction with Call of the Brotherhood, which has its own video, and Cold to Fire support to get the absolute maximum value. Anyways, that's all I got on the Eternity Shroud. Really fun item. Something I recommend experimenting with. In 3.13, there's certainly some interesting things that the Elementalist can do, given that the Elementalists will gain the ability to inflict shocks, chills, and ignites with chaos damage, so that's something that could be really interesting. But it's also something that can be used as a pure power item on a lot of different builds. Have fun, and I will see you in 3.13.